Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a 19-year-old son and wise old soul, Joey, who is trying hard to launch into adulthood. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Today's guest is Dallas Goodlet, a domestic adoptee with a unique twist in his adoption story. When he was 19, he found out that things weren't what they seemed, sending him off the rails with addiction and self-destructive behavior for about 5 years, and then continued using substances more casually for about 15 more years until about a year ago when he went into recovery from all substances. In today's episode, we will find out what caused him to go off the rails and what tools have helped him get back on track. So as you know, if you listened to these podcasts before, my 19-year-old adopted son, Joey, is still struggling with addiction. And so I'm all ears to learn more about the lived experience of an adoptee who is facing reality in recovery. So thank you very much for being here on Unraveling Adoption, Dallas.
Yes, thanks for having me, Beth.
Well, first, why don't you just tell us about your childhood, your adoption story, what you knew about it, at least when you were a kid?
Yeah, I'll just jump right in. So at 5 years old is when I first found out that I was adopted. I was sitting on my mom's lap. She was playing the piano. I got up there. We were talking, and she informed me that I was adopted at that time. She kind of was just brief to the point. She explained who I was adopted from. There was a family that lived down the road from us, a little ways, about 10 miles. She said their names and just said, hey, we're your real parents. We love you. And that was about it. Right then, I felt different. I felt, they could say all they want that they're my real parents, but I never really felt like they were. At that time, I'm 5 years old. So right then and there, I kind of felt like that was the first chapter of my life that, again, I didn't really have a tribe. I didn't really belong anywhere. And then just as I got older, going through school, got in a lot of fights, just had a lot of shame. I was embarrassed to be adopted, a lot of anger problems. I was very, very angry as a kid. Just felt worthless. Didn't feel like I had any value. But, my parents I had, they were great people. I can't really complain. We had a big family, had grandma, grandpa, always went to their house, cousins. So in that sense, I was very blessed. I wasn't beaten or, anything else as a kid. So, yeah, that's kind of my childhood. But, I don't know what they could have done any different. I just had a big hole in my heart and a big void and just really never felt wanted.
Yeah. So even though your parents were kind, sounds like, and you had all these, extended family members, did you have siblings too?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I had a sister that we actually adopted her from South Korea when she was like a month old. And then my older brother, we're all about 5 years apart. And then my older brother, he was the only biological kid my parents had. So I was the middle child. So not only being a middle child, that's hard enough, but being a middle child and adopted. Yeah, it was rough.
Yeah, the second son, but the adopted one, not the birth son.
Right.
Yeah, and you kind of blended in with your brother and your parents.
Yeah. I did. It's a great question. Yeah, I did. I even kind of look like some of my cousins. So I even grew up like, was I adopted from an uncle? I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah.
There's a sister.
Well, my sister, she had a little more hard time. She was from South Korea. So that was kind of obvious from the get-go. But yeah, I kind of blended in.
You could blend in. So at school, were you kind of labeled a behavior problem? Or was your anger at school or more at home?
Well, it was both.
Everywhere.
So my mom was a kindergarten teacher, and I actually went to the school she taught at. And that made it even harder because when you're a child of a school teacher, you don't have to wait till parent-teacher conferences for somebody to talk to your mom or your dad. They're right there down the hallway. So anything I ever did was magnified times 10. And that made my life even harder because I felt like I was acting out of anger, causing problems. And then I was embarrassing my mom. Yeah. So I felt even more shame, I almost felt like my parents had buyer's remorse at some times, like, because they adopted me. Because, like I say, I had college trouble and they'd have to hear about it. And it was a rough cycle. So, yeah, it didn't really help having her right down the hallway from all the teachers.
And was your older brother like a model student? And
he didn't get caught, I'll say that. Like, he didn't cause as much trouble as me, but he did a little bit. And I don't know. I just got caught for everything I did. I don't know why. I just did.
Sometimes that second kid, if the first kid is like perfect, it's like really impossible to meet those expectations when you come around. But being adopted, I'm sure that added several different layers to it. So, wow. And so your whole childhood, looking back, you can sense that you were struggling internally with these kind of existential questions, but nobody was saying, hey, bud, How are you feeling about your adoption?
No, nobody ever talked about it, including me. Like, I never brought it up. My parents, I mean, that first conversation we had when we were 5, that's the last conversation we had until 15 years later.
Okay.
But yeah, that was it. Nobody ever really asked me about anything.
And then what happened at 19? Something flipped for you.
So, 5 to about 19, I had all those issues and the negative self-talk, all the labels I put on myself, just feeling no value, no worth. And then, at 19, I found out who I thought my biological parents were in fact not. So that sent me off into a crazy tailspin of drugs and alcohol.
So before that, you were maybe a troubled kid, but weren't abusing drugs yet at that point until you found out this information?
No, not yet. Just kind of high school, kind of dabbling around.
Okay.
But yeah.
Like a typical.
Right. But for about 5 years after I found out that I didn't know who my real parents were, my biological parents, I went crazy doing drugs and just cocaine, alcohol, everything you could think of for about 5 years heavily.
Now tell me, what was the story about your birth parents? That is kind of crazy that you thought you knew who your birth parents were. What was that all about?
Yeah, so how that went was my adoption case was a closed case, and that means I wasn't really supposed to know anything. Okay. The birth mother didn't want me knowing anything. Well, some information kind of had gotten through to, I guess they were my foster parents. They were who I thought was my biological parents, because when I was a kid, my parents didn't get into any specifics about who my birth mother was. They just said, here's the family we adopted you from. So for so long, I felt like they had lied to me. So what happened was, who I thought my birth mother was, her name is Beth, and I was working at a Kmart, and she came in there one day and gave me her phone number and said, hey, let's have a talk. So I had a lot of hate in my heart, anger. I didn't want nothing to do with her. So I took the phone number, put it in my pocket, went home that day, and I was talking to my dad. And I said, hey, Dad, Beth came into the store today and tried to talk to me. And I just, I don't want to talk to her. He looked at me and said, Dallas, that's not your birth mother. And I already didn't know who I was. I didn't have really any identity, but anything I had left just exploded. Yeah. I didn't know anything at that point. I just felt like my whole identity just blew up at that time. So, yeah, I went crazy after that. It was just, nobody loves me. I don't love anybody else. I thought like, A, how can my birth mother give me up for adoption? And then B, the second family didn't want me either. Who the hell does want me? Anybody? And I wasn't having the best relationship with my parents at that time either. So I'm like, I went through 3 families by the time I was a year and a half old. I had already had 3 different families. So, yeah, I just thought like, right, nobody loves me, then no, I'm not going to love anybody else back either. So,
So you went self-destruct mode?
Yes, heavily. Like I say, just all the cocaine I could handle, marijuana, alcohol, pills. If I couldn't get my hand on illicit drugs, I would take cold and flu medicine or syrups from Walmart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Joey's done that. They're easy to steal or get out of somebody's cupboard. And take a bunch of that and that'll do you in for a while, or it could do you in for good.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. And I know that people drink, Joey drank hand sanitizer. And peroxide. You just grab whatever if you don't have money, right?
Right.
And were you working at the time or going to school?
Yeah, I was working at the time. I was actually like a manager at a Marriott franchise hotel. I don't want to say which one.
No kidding.
That's the thing, too. I've always kind of been a functioning addict.
You were able to do that?
I could wake up and smoke weed from the time I woke up and nobody would even know. I could do, I could do lines of cocaine in the bathroom and I'd come out and work and nobody would have any idea.
Whoa. Were you hyper and busy?
Well, I was always aware. So if I started a little bit hyper, I would be conscious of that and I would tone it down. So, yeah, there's people I talk to now. I'm like, do you know I was on coke when I was, I have no idea. When I was stoned, they had no idea.
Wow.
I couldn't really drink that much in public. People would know. But when I got off work, I drink a fifth of vodka or whatever in an hour and black out. And,
So you really just wanted to just escape. You were just done.
Yeah, I couldn't handle any reality. I didn't want anything to do with reality. I couldn't, relationships, I couldn't even tell you how to begin one, keep one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just a mess. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't hold relationships, anything. Yeah, I really wanted to die. And that's what I tell people is that whole expression suicide by cop, where somebody's scared to kill themselves so they have a cop shoot them. That's kind of how I was with the drugs. I wasn't going to stick a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger, but I thought if I do a whole bag of cocaine in 15 minutes and my heart's going to explode, I didn't kill myself, but subconsciously, that's what I was trying to do.
Okay. Or you're trying to get in trouble by the cops so they would put you out of your misery kind of thing. You were just kind of indirect way to die.
Right. Yeah. Say somebody that holds up somebody hostage and they don't really want to shoot themselves. They make the cops do it to them. That's how I was with the drugs. I was like, I'm not going to kill myself, but if I can have these drugs kill me, so be it.
Yeah, if it works out, oh man, that's a bad place to be for 5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough. And then what got you out of that
Yeah,
cycle?
24. I took a pretty heavy dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people I don't really advocate this for everybody, but they work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, I took a pretty heavy dose, and I think I tell everybody is I feel like I went through about 20 years of therapy in 4 hours.
Mm.
Just every negative emotion, every negative label I put on myself, I put on others, just all the anger, all the shame, all these things that I told myself that I was worthless. I didn't have any, they were just all gone immediately. So that day, I forgave my parents who I had all this misguided anger towards for so long. But yeah, when I took those mushrooms, everything just kind of went away.
Now, did you take them in a guided journey kind of situation or just a party drug kind of situation?
Stupidly, I took them in my car and I drove around.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I ended up at this cemetery of all places. The sun was getting ready to set, and I just remember I was thinking about life and death and just all these emotions. And then because the sun was setting behind these gravestones, it was like when that sun set, it was symbolic of my old self dying at the same time.
Oh, wow.
So that sun was just cresting over the horizon there. And it was just like they were coming together. Like when that sun was going down, my past was dying as well.
Wow.
And then when it finally went down, it was just everything was done.
And had you used a lot of psychedelics before this incident, or was this like your first experience?
I'd used it quite a bit before that.
But was this a bigger dose, or it just was the one that just kind of?
Yeah, it was just the one that did it.
Did the job?
I had horrible trips before then where they just were mental hell for me.
Yeah.
And I had great ones. But no, the first time I ever took psychedelics, I was 18. But I've always had a pretty good relationship with those because even if you have a bad experience, you can learn from it.
Yeah, if you integrate it, you work through it. My son's done a ton of psychedelics. That's kind of what caused him to want to kill himself, actually. But he's also had really good trips, just totally beautiful and warm and united. So he's kind of had both the good and bad like you've had. But man, that sounds like a really good one.
Yeah.
And since that one journey at 24, have you developed more bitterness, or has the hatred or the anger come back?
No.
Or is it really, really gone?
Yeah, no, it's all been gone for good.
Wow.
Like I say, I had so much misguided anger and hatred towards them. I felt like they had lied to me, and it was all these selfish thoughts from my inside. How could you do this to me? And it was all about me. Mm-hmm. And I finally understood from their perspective and their point of view what they were trying to do. They were trying to basically shield me and guide me when I was a young kid, because they would have gotten into a million details when I was 5 years old. I'd probably been so confused and probably been worse off. I don't know.
Yeah. When you're 5, you don't understand birth parents and
right. So they were doing the best they could.
How children get made and stuff like that.
Right, exactly. So they were doing the best they could. So yeah, just forgiveness. And when somebody's messed up on drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of stuff that we do too that we need to forgive ourselves about. I mean, I've done some unspeakable acts that and the thing is, that makes you want to do more drugs and alcohol because you want to forget.
Yeah, the shame. Mm-hmm.
Like, you did something stupid when you were drunk or on drugs, and it's like, I want to do more drugs and drink to forget about what I did. So the great thing about the mushrooms was I forgave myself as well.
Wow.
And no, since then, like I say, I'm 41 now, and my parents and I, we haven't really had an argument since then.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and we used to be bad. Like, I'd come home and they'd say anything, and I'd punch a hole in the wall. I'd act like a lunatic towards them.
Wow. Now, do they know that the change was brought about with the psilocybin, or do they just think you found God or something? Or
No, that's a great question. No, they probably wondered the next day, because I remember I went back to their house and I didn't do anything around the house to help them. But the next day, because again, now it was about serving others. Now it was about me not being so selfish. So the next day I went home and I started helping to pick up their house. I started helping do lawn work. And yeah, they're probably thinking, is he like, that's probably the first time they ever wondered if I was on drugs. Like, who is this guy? So, yeah, I've never told them, and I might someday. They haven't done any of the things I've done. So if I told them, I mean, the real story behind me, it'd probably break their heart, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So time and a place, maybe they'll know someday.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. And so after that amazing transformation with the psilocybin, you obviously had a huge change of heart, but you kept going with smoking weed or whatever for a bunch of more years. Did that seem to just kind of keep you settled, or it was just kind of for partying? Or
yeah, so from about 24 to 30, I just was drifting through life at that time. I mean, I went to college earlier. I didn't graduate, but I had some credits. But at 24, like, I didn't have a career going. I just felt like I was drifting, like a lot of people that age are that don't really have a career at that point. So Yeah, I was still going out, still drinking. I was still smoking pot. I mean, from the time I woke up, from the time I went to bed, did some coke here and there, but I mean, it was nothing like it used to be. But yeah, now when I was doing it, it was more just for fun.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have that anger and resentment in me where I would do something all night just to escape and get out of my mind. I would just, I went
Yeah.
out and had fun at that time. I was bartending as
Okay.
well. So, um, yeah, I drank a lot at that time and party, but it wasn't like it used to be.
I bet. So, but and for kind of a different purpose, a different
Right.
reason, you weren't trying to self-destruct at that point.
Right.
Okay. And then you said about a year ago, you decided to give it all up. And what caused that shift and how is it going?
Yeah. Well, if I can, I'm going to go back to when I was 30. So I had my daughter when I was 30.
Okay.
So when I had my daughter, she was the only blood I know.
Mm.
And that changed everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 10 years, I've been drunk 2 times in 10 years. And that's something I'm very proud to say because it used to be, like I say, a nightly event.
Wow.
So at around 30, I was still smoking pot, though. Just the time I woke up, the time I went to bed, couldn't stop that. And then at about 35, I started getting into walking. And if we can touch on that real quick, because that's something that I tell anybody. I'd say walking almost is up there with the psilocybin as far as what it has done for my life, because it has.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Real quick, there's a book out there I'd recommend for everybody. It's called Dopamine Nation. It's by Dr. Anna Lemke.
Okay.
Get that book, because that book talks about what sets off our dopamine receptors, whether it be drugs, alcohol, food, sex, TV screens. We're all trying to get that dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So I've also been a habitual cigarette smoker, smoked over a pack a day for 20 years. So when I started out on these walking journeys about 6 years ago, there's something in that book that I didn't know I was doing at the time until I read this recently, but it's something called self-binding. And there's 3 components to self-binding, and one of those is physical self-binding. And what that means is if you have an addiction to whatever it is, the self-binding is where you set up a physical barrier between you and that substance.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would go out on these walks, I would go out and walk for 10 miles, be about 3 hours of walking, sometimes longer.
Wow.
When I was living in downtown Kansas City, I'd walk for 7, 8 hours a day sometimes.
Wow.
Right. So I wouldn't take these cigarettes with me. So what that would do was I would be gone for 7, 8 hours without any cigarettes. And the only discipline I had to have at that time was, not pick a disgusting cigarette butt off the ground or bum one from somebody, because I can't smoke because I don't have anything with me. So that forced me to get away from cigarettes. And if you sleep 8 hours a day, that's 2/3 of your day right there without that substance. So after about a month, that helped me quit cigarettes, and it slowly helped me wean off really about everything else. So quit cigarettes, quit drinking, cocaine, quit all that, still smoking weed. About the last year, the weed had to go because it wasn't serving me anymore. It was just kind of holding me back in life. So yeah, for about the last year now, I've been completely sober without any substances. And yeah, I felt the best I ever have. Because if you'd asked me 5 years ago, you think you'll ever be like, I thought I was going to smoke weed until I die.
Yeah.
And sobriety is a 1 day at a time journey. So I can't sit here and say I've quit forever because I've quit for today.
Yeah, for today, for sure.
Right. So like I was telling you earlier, I'm not even on caffeine anymore. So I just have food and water in my system at this point.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, even caffeine. That's because so many people are hooked on caffeine. And the weed, can we just talk about the weed for a second? Because it seems like that was your longest running addiction. And it is certainly what has tangled my son up. And God, nowadays it's so prevalent in the schools.
Everywhere.
And vaping is God, I can't even walk around in the public without smelling it. It's like, and he's kind of to the place too, where he's like, well, this doesn't even do anything for me anymore. I don't even like it, but I just am hooked on it now. How long did you have that feeling before you were able to kick it?
Well, let me tell you about marijuana. To me, out of all the things I've done, marijuana to me was the hardest one to quit.
Yep,
anybody that it drives me nuts, people say marijuana is not addicting. BS, it is.
Yeah. Oh, I've had people tell me that all the time. It's crazy.
It's so addicting. And here's the thing about marijuana is the reason why it's so hard and it's very insidious is because, like cigarettes, there's no benefits to cigarettes. Alcohol is really not either, other than like, I want to be sociable. I mean, there's really no health benefits to alcohol. Whereas cannabis, there are some health benefits to it, medicinal benefits. So I think that's where my mind would play tricks on me. Like, well, it's not that bad. It's medicine, right? And that's what I always tell myself.
Yeah, it's helping me sleep or whatever. Yeah.
Another good thing in that book I was talking about, Dopamine Nation, this doctor talks about how she had a girl come into her office, had anxiety real bad. Why smoke? And that's what people that smoke, they say, I'm smoking, get rid of the anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So the girl goes, I can't get off the weed because that's what helps my anxiety. So the doctor said, what I want you to do is take a 30-day break. Just don't smoke any weed. And I want you to come back and tell me how your anxiety is. So in the book, the girl comes back and she says, hey, my anxiety is gone. Well, the doctor's like,
Mm-hmm.
right, because when you get away from weed and you have this anxiety, it's not really from the outside world. That anxiety is from your withdrawal symptoms you're having of being away from cannabis. So we
Oh.
think that the weed is getting rid of our anxiety when really it's causing it. So anytime you're not smoking weed, you wake up, you've been off of it for, 8 hours if you're sleeping, you're going through withdrawals. So when you wake
Oh.
up, you're like, oh, I got anxiety from the world. No, you have anxiety
Oh.
from marijuana withdrawals.
Oh, that's how it keeps you
Right.
sucked in.
Right. So once you
Mm.
get away from it, you find out, oh, I don't really need
Yeah.
it. I smoked 22 years and before I even went to the bathroom in the morning, I was smoking
Mm-hmm.
pot and it was all day. I was permanently high.
Wow.
I never really had a break. But after about 45 to 60 days, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't need this. I don't need it at all.
And your brain came back online. Did your cognition change when you went off it?
Yeah, I felt a lot more clear.
Yeah.
And there's another thing called anhedonia. And anhedonia is where you don't feel any pleasure anymore.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of people, when they first quit a drug or alcohol, they're going to go through that because their dopamine's been hijacked by this drug or alcohol.
Yeah.
So you have to find new ways to replace those dopamine hits.
Yeah. So what did you use?
Well, like being outside walking, being in nature, exercising, sleeping. The sleep will help that too, because when you get off the drugs and alcohol, you'll sleep better. So that's good for your dopamine receptors. Anything that you can hit that dopamine with, it's all natural.
Yeah.
That's what you want to do because that's what we're all after. We all want to be happy.
Sure.
We all want that hit of dopamine, but why do it with a substance?
Yeah, it might work for a time and feel that need, but man, then you get trapped in it.
Well, it's right. You get trapped. And then the only thing that's going to get that dopamine firing again is those drugs if you keep using them all the time.
Yep.
And then that's the cycle of addiction.
Yeah, it's so hard to get out of. I'm hoping that with all the kind of knowledge and understanding and resources that Joey has, that he'll find his way out soon. But I'm empathetic about how hard it is to quit. And it's everywhere.
It is. And really, it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Another book that really helped me with cigarettes was Alan Carr, The Easy Way to Quit Smoking, because he really just breaks it down like our perspective on why we smoke cigarettes. And a lot of that was, I smoke cigarettes because I'm anxious or whatever. And then cigarettes are a stimulant and they cause anxiousness. So like once you really learn and it's like what I'm doing that I'm trying to escape from is actually causing me the problems.
Yeah.
And it's like, why am I doing this? I'm an idiot. You know what I mean? But we don't think that.
It doesn't make sense, but
it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. But it's so hard, especially with cannabis. My son, after like a day or two off of it, he's like, oh my gosh, I can think again. Cannabis just kind of stunts your brain a bit and causes it to be foggy and not really clear about your thinking to be able to be so logical. Yeah, it's a tough one. Do you think the continuing of the substance use and the kind of those, especially those first 5 years of really self-destructive behavior, how much do you attribute that to your adoption pain?
Well, for me, it's hard. Like consciously, I think it contributed to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, I can never know because I was adopted and I'll never be able to really know if I'd have done things differently. But yeah, there were times where I'll tell you, for instance, like birthdays, Mother's Day, I would get as wasted as I could get.
Oh, so,
yeah, I know for sure those days I was doing it because of the pain.
Yep.
But, like when I started in high school, I was probably doing it to fit in or be cool. I don't know. But yeah.
Peer pressure and experimenting.
But right, those years I was doing it, you asked, those years I went really on a downward spiral. I would say, yeah, when I think about that, it was all due to that. Yeah. Even when I would see like families out walking, like a mom and dad and their kids, like that would trigger me.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Just seeing like happy families.
Yeah.
It's like, well, time to go do more cocaine. I want to die. So TV shows, anything, you name it.
So you were pretty conscious of those triggers and realizing it was the family situation that was causing you so much pain.
Oh,
you knew at the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have anyone that understood? Did you know any other adoptees?
No. Well, like me and my sister were real close. We'll talk about it now, but at that time, when I was 19, she would have been 13 or 14.
Okay.
Living at home with mom and dad, and I was living on my own. So
you couldn't really talk to her about that.
No, I didn't have anybody to talk. And my best friends, they knew, but again, it was like, I didn't want to talk about it anyway, but I probably should have, obviously.
Yeah. But if they're not adopted, they might not really get it unless they're really attuned to adoption. Most people think adoption's great.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
Well, I'll tell you though, I think I see what you're saying there, but I also think that, at least from my world, the people I told, I think they got it.
Okay.
But I see what you're saying too. Like people probably don't understand the pain, the real pain it does cause. But I think like if somebody's real close to their mom and dad
Yeah.
and they know somebody else and you don't even know your own mom and dad or you were separated at birth, I mean, I don't know. I would think some people like, man, it's got to be hard. So like my friends, I think they knew I was struggling. But again, it was, you know, especially we're guys. I don't know if it'd be different with girls. They were never like, hey, man, how are you doing? I mean.
Okay. They didn't do big check-ins and emotional temperatures.
And that could be a guy
like
thing. I don't know. Maybe girls would, but. And even if they would, I probably wouldn't even want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get just shut down. It's so much to deal with. And unless you have someone that's very skilled or attuned, but most people don't have that in their family or they're like, you didn't have an adoption competent therapist lined up. Right. I don't think. Maybe back then they didn't even have them. I don't even know. But now they have them, but they're still hard to find. You have to kind of dig around. And when you're in the depths of your pain, you can't do that. That has to be kind of set up ahead of time before you even need it. I suggested to somebody that they should get therapy for their kid. And she's like, well, they're not really having trouble. I'm like, well, get the therapist now anyway.
Yes.
They might have trouble later. So get it going just in case.
Well, and another thing too is how many, like a parent, you think you know your kid. But I mean, how many parents truly do? I mean, your kids could be hurting on the inside and they don't have no idea.
Yeah. And a lot of adopted kids keep their stuff away from their adoptive parents because they don't want to hurt them or make things worse or get kicked out or, you know, there's just a lot of layers there. So therapy for everyone.
Right. Oh, hey, Beth, let me tell you something real quick too, because I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So I'm going to flash back here when I was 19. My birth mom was locked up in a mental institution. So from what I found out, I was basically taken from her by the state.
Oh, wow.
So some of you said just made me think of this. My parents, when they adopted me, I feel like I'd be hurting them as well by asking anything about my birth mother.
Yeah.
So that's another thing I didn't want to bring up to them. But when I took the psilocybin, I thought, okay, I'm doing this out of the good of my heart. I'm not doing this to hurt them. So yeah, I actually went home and talked to them some point after that about my birth mom. And they gave me that information about her being locked up in a mental institution. But yeah, my birth mother, she actually had handwritten letters that I still have to this day that she was writing to my foster parents about me. Her handwriting looks just like mine. It's kind of weird. Yeah, she talked about being locked up in a mental institution and how she wasn't crazy. And then she had these passages in there about how anybody that gets put in these places, it'd make him go crazy. Yeah, from what I found out, I think she got caught with some drugs and they put her in there. And then from what I found out, pretty much the state came and took me away from her. But yeah, that's another reason, like you said, I didn't want to talk to my parents and ask them anything because I thought it was going to hurt them as well.
Yeah.
So, but I finally did. So that's how I found that out.
Okay. And at that point, they were amenable to you talking about it and nobody's feelings got hurt or anything. They were just wanting to help.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I prefaced it with, too, you know, hey, obviously this is a huge thing for me. And they understood, you know what I mean? They do. So
it sounds like your birth mom had struggles with drugs and there is a genetic propensity. Do you think that caused your drug use to be amplified? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I wonder that because when I do anything, it's 100 miles an hour or nothing.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a moderation button.
Yep.
I wish I did.
That's the way my son is too.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't quit smoking pot and stuff, but drinking alcohol, marijuana, anything, I get it and it's gone within days. Yeah. This whole thing, people say, do it in moderation. Well, if moderation doesn't work for you, you need to understand that and then stop it cold turkey because for so long, I tried quitting things a million times. I thought, well, I'll do it in moderation. I'll just do it on the weekends or I'll do it at night. I'll do it at whatever time. And just there I go failing again. So I just finally woke up after decades and said, I just can't do it at all.
Yeah.
Never again.
That's the way Joey is too. He even notices when he was partying with his friends and stuff, his friends were just playing with it, you know, just for fun. And he was trying to unalive himself with it. You know, he knew that the way he was using it to black out and to totally disconnect was way different than the way his friends were using it. So he noticed that too. I used to be addicted to sugar for my whole life. It was a huge problem. I lost 65 pounds when I quit eating sugar and kept it off because I eat zero sugar. I haven't had sugar for 7 years.
Do you have any carbs or just no sugar?
Yeah, I eat carbs. I eat whole fruit and rice and stuff, but just no sugar or honey or maple syrup or anything like that. And I can't just eat a little bit of sugar. If I eat a little bit, I'm gone again. So I totally get that some people, it's such a strong pull. You can't just dabble. Right. But I know some people can. You know, I watch people eat a half a cookie. I'm like, what?
Yeah, how do you do it? Right.
But I think there's some genetic stuff in there. And
yeah, that's the thing about me is food addiction. I used to weigh 280 pounds at one time.
Whoa.
I've lost over 100 pounds over my life.
Wow.
And kept it off. But, well, I should say kept it off. There's times all ebbs and flows there with my weight too. And
wow,
it's crazy. Like when I gain weight, something internally is going on with me too.
Yeah.
And you can tell.
Yeah, it's like a little signal.
Right.
So did you quit eating or you changed your food behavior around the same time as all the other drugs?
Well, so when I grew up, my parents are overweight. And when I grew up, we ate out all the time, all the time. I mean, I hardly ever had home cooked meals. So when I was about 18, when I graduated high school, that's when I kind of make my own food choices. I was sick of being overweight at that time. So yeah, I just I don't know, the last 20 years, I probably had, I don't know, not even 10 sodas.
Oh, wow.
But I used to drink pop like all the time. So yeah, at about 18, I started changing my eating habits. But I'll go on, like I did a 7-day fast not too long ago. Didn't eat food for 7 days, just drank water, drank coffee, drinking caffeine at the time. But when I got that 7-day fast, I mean, I went on a binge.
Oh,
And
I bet.
Right. And when I binge these foods, it reminds me going back to the drug days because I'm just substituting food for drugs.
It's the same thing.
It is the same thing.
It's the same dopamine receptors. Yep. It's the same exact system.
And it's that same shame when you're done. You're like, this feels good. Then when you get done, you're like, why did I do this?
What did I just do?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never used drugs really, but the sugar, I'm so grateful that I had that experience with sugar because I can understand what my son's going through.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. My sugar addiction and his weed and other stuff addiction, it's the same process. We're both trying to do the same thing. Just mine is legal and his is, not. And mine is, it'll kill you in the long run.
Oh, yeah.
Sugar is really bad for you. But mine is so sanctioned by the culture that it pushes it on you. Everywhere you go, they want you to eat more sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So, God, it's really tricky. Well, it's very interesting talking to you. And I wondered, is there anything that you think that adoptive parents should know about addiction? Say they have preteens. What should adoptive parents be looking out for?
Yeah, I guess you'll have the behavioral clues if they're acting weird or different. But I guess just stay, talk to your kids all the time. If you find out they're doing drugs or alcohol, I would say first try to empathize with them and try to understand rather than chewing their ass out and getting on them. I think that'd be the worst thing you could do.
Yeah. That'll send them back into it deeper.
Right. The hard thing is when somebody's an adolescent, it's hard to know if they're doing it just for peer pressure and fitting in and being cool or trying to find ourselves who we are, or if there's something like deep down going on inside them.
Yeah. That's where that open communication is.
Right. That's exactly why I say talk to them and find out why they're doing it. Because again, I'd say probably 80% of kids do it because they're kids and, hey, I'm growing up in this crazy world. I'm going to experiment. I got peer pressure. Yeah. But there's probably a large fraction that are hurting deep inside, whether it be being bullied at school, whether it be not feeling love from their parents, whatever it is. So, right, like you said, open up those lines of communication and find out why they're doing it.
Yeah. And while you're at it, talk about adoption along the way, right? Just make that topic more open and available. I wonder if I'm not blaming your parents or judging them at all. And it partly was kind of the era. That's kind of what people did back then. But if you had more chances to talk about really what happened with your birth mom and had more transparency with that, do you think that would have affected those rough 5 years for you? Do you think you would have had to go through all of that?
Well, I think if I would have known before then, I don't think I would have. I think I probably still would have been doing things to cover up that hole in my heart.
Yeah.
But I felt like I was lied to and I felt like I was betrayed. So that's what really set me off the deep end. Yeah. Had they told me earlier, I think it would have changed some. I mean, I think my destructive level went from 10, probably down to like 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. You probably still would have had a rough time, but it wouldn't have been so
but it wouldn't have been as bad.
Yeah, because the deception is really, really damaging.
Right.
And I know they were trying to protect you, but it backfires every time when parents try to protect. And, there's a lot of really difficult stories in adoption. They probably just didn't want you to know, or maybe they didn't want to know what happened with your birth mom. It's like, oh, yucky story. But
I found out when we started talking, as we opened up about it, they were advised by the court systems. So like they had a counselor they had to talk to and everything and try to give them guidance. So the county counselor, whoever they had, was the one that gave my parents that advice on not to get into details with my kid. And then the other advice, the other advice they gave them was they said, unless your kid comes to you and talks about it, then you don't talk about it.
Oof, that's so rough. And I believe that because I didn't get any information either.
Yeah.
When I was a young mom, and my son's a lot younger than you. But yeah, and now the adoption competent people are saying your kids are always thinking about it.
Yeah.
So just bring it up casually and open the door and see if they want to walk through the door of conversation often.
Yeah.
Right. Does that sound good to you as an adoptee?
Yeah. If my kid was adopted, I would know how I would want it to be brought up. If it was me, I'd just be like, hey, like, if you don't want to talk about this, that's fine. I'm just letting you know if you ever want to,
Yeah.
just come talk to me. I don't want to make it weird or, make it uncomfortable
Hmm.
for you. And that's the thing too. I think we make things how they are. So like if somebody's like, hey, we need to have a serious talk, it gets weird. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah. If you make it a big
right, if you
giant
make it a big
deal,
giant deal, then it becomes one. So I was like, hey, no pressure. Just
yeah.
letting you know. If you ever want to, let's talk. If you don't, I get it too. But if you do.
Yeah. I wonder if your birth mom was also into the guitar, or I wonder if they were good at music, or I wonder if they also were athletic like you are, or just
Right.
simple little things that just can pop in and out. So they know that it's a safe topic, that they're not going to hurt your feelings, or you're not going to run away if you mention it, because the kids are thinking about it
Right.
way more than we think. And I know that adopted kids try to protect their adoptive parents, and that's so hard. We want to alleviate that as much as possible, because kids shouldn't have to carry that around with them.
Right.
Well, I am so impressed with you. The walking, and that's been your main recovery tool, right? The walking.
Oh yeah. I mean, it is.
And you keep walking every day,
Yeah,
right?
to this day, like I walk about 5 miles a day minimum.
Whoa. Where do you go? Just on a trail or just around town or anywhere?
I just walk wherever.
Anywhere.
Yeah, like I'm in Florida now. We're going to move back to Colorado, but Colorado, it's easy. There's trails everywhere. So,
oh yeah, Colorado, you can walk anywhere.
Yeah, you can walk anywhere. But I mean, even just around the block. And, I tell people if you split up 5 miles, 30 minutes a day, 3 times. So, like you get up, walk in the morning, 30 minutes, walk 30 minutes at lunchtime, 30 minutes at night. That's 5 miles right there. Doesn't take no time.
Wow.
Anytime I'm having a bad day, I just get out and go walk.
The walking helps. Is it the fresh air or the physical or both, or is there some other process going on?
I think it's both. And then I think the biggest thing is when I go out on walks, sometimes I listen to podcasts or whatever, but a lot of times I don't listen to anything. And that's when I'm alone with my thoughts.
Time to think.
And that's when I can kind of it's like having like a garage full of clutter in your mind. I kind of like take a box, put it here, put it there, and just everything's kind of unraveled and everything makes sense at that point. So I don't know what it is. Nature, sunshine, there's just so many benefits to walking. But like I say, I think the biggest thing is somebody struggling with any addiction, it separates you from that vice. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So just leave it out.
Leave it in the car.
And just go. Just go out and walk.
Just go.
All the metaphors, like life metaphors you get out when you're walking. There's times I'll go out and walk 3 or 4 miles and I know where I'm going and you want to give up, you want to quit. Well, it's just one step at a time. So it's like with addictions or whatever you're going through, just take one step at a time. And then you'll look back and you're like, oh my God, look how far I've walked.
Yeah.
You don't even believe it. And that's just like life.
Yeah.
I never thought I could do this. And look how far I came. And then when you want to give up, it's like, I got to walk home. You know what I mean? You can't just lay there on the road or, if you call an Uber, maybe that's kind of cheating. But yeah, if you walk home, you have to do it. So there's just so many great life metaphors I've got now when I'm out on walks.
That's awesome. And you're a walking coach?
Yeah, online, walking, mental health, losing weight. Like I say, I've lost a ton of weight. Yeah, I think the niche I want to get into soon is I want to help specifically adopted kids. I want to help them basically time collapse the pain that they don't have to go through. Because I've known quite a few adopted kids in my life, and every single one of them has had pain. It's like, how can you not? So I just want to teach them, give them the tools to not have to go through starting about 15 to about 40. So I went through about 25 years of heartache. Oof. If I live to be 100, hopefully that's a quarter of my life gone in pain.
Yeah, that's a lot of years.
So yeah, I want to help out kids eventually. But yeah, right now just doing some coaching, doing that.
Yeah, good. And if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they find you?
Yeah, you can just look me up on Instagram. It's just kind of a play on words for walking. It's at @the_walk_king.
Very good. I'll put that in the links below. Is there anything else you wanted to share that I haven't asked you about?
One more piece of advice I would give to any adoptive parents is you have to tell your adopted kid that you love them so much more than you would a biological kid. And biological kids need to hear it themselves. My wife, she had problems. Her dad never told her she loved her until she was 30. And she knew her dad loved her. It was known, but she just never said the words. And it affected her big time. So when you're adopted, you really need to hear it. So any adoptive parents, shower your adopted kid and just let them know they are loved, 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 loved.
They have like a deficit, right, to start with. So you got to build that up. Yeah. Gosh, we need to just do whatever we can to help our adoptive kids, because the statistic I know is that adopted people are 43% more likely to have a struggle with addiction in their lifetime. 43% more. That's a huge number.
That's crazy. I can believe it. I like to see what the crime numbers are too. Adopted kids turn a life of crime too. I bet that's high.
Oh yeah. When I think the jails and prisons are filled with fostered and adopted kids, it's exponentially greater. So we need to wake up as parents and community members doctors and therapists that adoption is like a risk factor, big risk factor for all these things. And we need to do whatever we can to mitigate the pain that causes these addictions and mental health stuff. So, well, I'm so glad I met you. I hope someday you can meet my son. I think you and he would have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, he's a smart kid. I've listened to his podcast. I mean, he's very, like, the way he articulates things. He's, like I say, he reminds me of myself. But when I was younger, like, I was into reading and writing and all these things for self-development. Thank God I was at that time. But I could tell he's a very, very, very smart kid.
Yeah, he really wants to help other adopted people too. That's his dream. If he can get into a more stable place, he says, Mom, I want to work with adopted kids.
Yeah.
So maybe he'll follow in your footsteps with that. And I look forward to that day when he can reach down and help some other kids that are struggling. So,
good.
Well, thank you for doing this work and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And it's a pretty harrowing journey. I'm glad you survived it all. And you're making a big difference in the world now. And I know that the listeners are going to leave this episode with more empathy and understanding and kind of a human story about what happens to people with so much pain. So Thank you very much for sharing.
Well, thank you, Beth.
And people that are listening, please share this with anyone you know who might be struggling with addiction, or any adoptees you know that are struggling with addiction, or any adoptive parents that might want to have this information. And these stories are so important to share. And find Unraveling Adoption at unravelingadoption.com. There is a page on there for adoptive parents to find out about our adoptive parent support group called Aptitude. You could find that at unravelingadoption.com/aptitude. And if any of you would like to support our podcast, because we are commercial free, so the only way that I get paid from this at all is through Patreon. So if you'd like to support us with $5 a month or more, it is very easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/unravelingadoption. So thank you all for listening to this important episode. Thank you again, Dallas. And Dallas and I want you all to stay safe.